Well, President Trump's address to the UN lasted almost an hour, well over his scheduled time limit, and ranged over many of his favourite themes. He didn't hold back, taking aim at the United Nations for failing to help his efforts to end wars, warning that recognising a state of Palestine was a reward for Hamas, and describing climate change as the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world. President Trump attacked European nations, warning that they were being destroyed by mass migration.
It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you. I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell. In America, we've taken bold action to swiftly shut down uncontrolled migration. Once we started detaining and deporting everyone who crossed the border and removing illegal aliens from the United States, they simply stopped coming. They're not coming anymore. We're getting a lot of credit, but they're not coming anymore.
Well, despite the success of last week's state visit to Britain, President Trump then turned on London and its mayor, Sadiq Khan.
And I have to say, I look at London, where you have a terrible mayor, terrible mayor, and it's been so changed. Now they want to go to Sharia law. But you're in a different country. You can't do that. Both the immigration and their suicidal energy ideas will be the death of Western Europe if something is not done immediately. This cannot be sustained.
Well, tonight, after his meeting with Ukraine's President Zelensky, the US president appeared to signal a shift in his approach to the war in Ukraine. In a post on Truth Social, he said he now believes Ukraine can win all of its land back from Russia. He addressed this after his meeting with the French President Emmanuel Macron.
It could be that Russia's a paper tiger. I don't know what they are, but 3.5 years of fighting and killing everybody, of killing 7,000 people a week for nothing. So it's a very sad situation, but most of you have seen the recent statement I put out a little while ago. But I feel that way. I really do feel that way. Let them get their land back.
Well, Volodymyr Zelensky welcomed his remarks.
Trump is a game changer by himself if he will be sure in Ukraine. And I think that he is more close now to this situation.
Well, joining me now is Nick Westcott. He's a former British ambassador and a professor of practice in diplomacy at SOAS. Good evening to you, Nick.
Good evening.
Well, there's a huge amount to discuss here, but let's just start with those latest remarks about the war in Ukraine, talking about Russia as a paper tiger, and saying that he now believes Ukraine could win back all of the territory that is currently occupied by Russian forces. Do you take that as a significant shift, which is how President Zelensky has described it tonight?
Yes, it was definitely the most unexpected turn in President Trump's speech. I mean, there were three particularly significant points, and that, if you like, was the main one, which he reinforced afterwards also by committing himself to 100% support for NATO. And this is a big change, and it's interesting to reflect whether the meeting he had with Putin in Alaska is actually sinking in that he was humiliated by Putin, who got everything he wanted and gave Trump absolutely nothing. So Trump came away from it looking weak and incapable, and Trump doesn't like that. And I think it is quite possible that he's been reflecting on that and thinking that maybe he's not going to get so much as he expected from President Putin, in which case his words in support of Zelensky and of NATO are both very significant changes.
Yeah, I mean, he did in that post stress his support for NATO and NATO in its defence of Ukraine. He'd also earlier signalled that he could impose tough sanctions, tough tariffs on Russia. I mean, he has been expressing these views of increasing exasperation with President with President Putin. Do you think that President Trump is now actually prepared to move from those warnings to actually taking action, actually imposing really tough economic measures on Russia?
Not right now. He's not going to return to where President Biden was, giving Ukraine almost unlimited financial and weaponry and support, but he is going to allow the Europeans to fund increased military support to President Zelensky, to the Ukrainians. He combined it with tough words on Europe in terms of them still continuing to buy Russian oil. And he said, Europeans should step up. They shouldn't be funding the Russian war machine. They should cut their consumption. And this is largely countries like Hungary, which normally are his good friends in Europe. So there's a little dichotomy there. But the other striking feature was that while he was backing Ukraine, backing NATO, he was extremely critical of Europe as a whole. And it was a very political speech. A lot of it was clearly designed to appeal to his MAGA base and to the national conservatives throughout Europe, hence his theme of migration and Europe's need to stop illegal migration. That was explicit support to the national conservatives, the far right throughout Europe.
So fascinating, so much to talk about. One of the other important issues there at the UN has been the moves by Britain, France, Australia, Canada to recognise a state of Palestine. Now, President Trump has criticised that, saying that he thinks that it honours Hamas, that it's a reward for Hamas. But he also talked about how he does want to end the war in Gaza, how he does want to get all the hostages home. What did you make of what he had to say on that?
The other striking thing was his approach to Gaza. He said relatively little about it in his hour-long speech. It really only got a sort of single paragraph, most of which was criticizing those who were recognizing Palestine. And as you say, saying he does want peace, but wants to get the hostages back, but not a word of criticism of Israel for what it is doing. That's not a surprise, but he didn't really enter into the Gaza debate. It was not the main feature of his speech at all. So it was what you would expect him to say, frankly, backing the Israeli position and not getting drawn in to the fact that this is actually, along with Sudan, single biggest crisis in the world today, and the one that is most severely undermining the attempts by the United Nations to impose some humanitarian values and to bring conflicts to an end. So it went sort of two ways: one, support for Israel; two, not really backing the UN.
We've had the new British Foreign Secretary, Yvette Cooper, again condemning Israel's actions in Gaza, again warning of the dangers of mass starvation. But we had that big statement from the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, saying that Britain is now recognising a Palestinian state. Were you surprised that he didn't actually go to the UN when there were so many other world leaders there?
Yeah, it's an interesting statement. He did go last year, whereas Rishi Sunak had not the year before that. So he has been there. But you would have thought, given the state of the world and his aspiration that Britain should be playing a big role in the world, that he was not there in person. I can't say why that he made that decision. It may be he didn't want to get embroiled too directly, too personally in the debate over Gaza. He's happy for the British government to move on Palestinian recognition, but he doesn't want it too closely linked to himself. So it's a slightly ambiguous sign, but it doesn't really reinforce Britain's position at the United Nations, which is looking increasingly precarious, to be honest with you. We are still a member of the Security Council, but our weight in global affairs is weakening. People wanted to know whether we were going to recognize Palestine. That is an important move, and it's symbolically important, it's globally important. But outside of that, Britain's influence is waning.
Well, perhaps Sir Keir Starmer should read your upcoming book, How to Be a Diplomat. Nick Westcott, former British ambassador, great to speak to you. Thank you so much.